We are so happy to have them with us today. And I'm going to turn it over to them so that they can tell us a little bit about themselves and a little bit about their organization. And with that, ladies, I'm turning it over to you.
You go first and then turn it over to me.
I'm Georgia Walker. I'm the Executive Director of Journey to New Life and one of the 3 founders. And we, Sister Rose and I worked for 10 years in St. Louis for an organization we were involved at its inception and worked for 10 years, and that was called the Center for Women in Transition. And we provided housing for women coming out of prison. We came to Kansas City and have subsequently in 2013, just a century off. In 2013, we started Journey to New Life because we had an idea of how we wanted to set up an organization to help with the reentry of men and women. And Sister Rose will tell you.
As Georgia mentioned, we had the opportunity in St. Louis to work with Center for Women in Transition, and it was a brand new organization at the time that we started with it, and I was the first full-time employee, so we got to see it develop and grow. And my history is I had worked in healthcare and did a lot of program development within the healthcare field, and I found that I really enjoyed doing that. So when the opportunity falls in my lap, I definitely go with it. And one of the aspects of Center for Women in Transition was that the mission statement included restorative justice. And so in the last 5 years of being there with that, we did a lot of work statewide for restorative justice. And that's still very much an interest of mine. I was on the initial board of directors of Journey to New Life and the chairperson and still on the board, but have stepped back from being on the executive committee and being an officer so that we develop broad, responsible leadership within our board. I know what can happen to nonprofits if it's not turned over in capable hands. I'm also now on the board of Center for Conflict Resolution here in Kansas City, and they do full-time work with restorative justice. So I'm kind of working on the front end and the back end, hopefully keeping people from getting into criminal activity and developing skills so they don't get there, and then also working with those returning to society from the criminal justice system. And I'm going to give a little bit of background in terms of the United States criminal justice system, just to kind of situate. When Georgia said that we decided when we moved to Kansas City, we knew some people because of statewide organizations. So we started talking with those individuals, and we found that there were agencies doing some reentry work, but they had a specific focus to who they accepted into their programs. And we knew from our experience that especially those with dual diagnosis of mental illness and substance abuse have a really hard time reentering society and getting on the right track. And so we made sure that we included them within our program. And so we have a very broad definition of who we accept. Georgia's executive director has really developed that in terms of serving vets, in serving sex offenders, in serving those with a dual diagnosis. And the 60%, at least 60% of the people in the prisons have a mental illness, and approximately 80% have substance abuse problems. If you follow legislation that has affected incarceration, it is because of the war on drugs and criminalizing addictions and drugs that has filled our prisons. We went from having about 500 from about 200 per 100,000 residents or citizens were incarcerated in 1980, and now it's over 500. So it has more than doubled. And there's over 2 million people in the state and federal prisons at the current time. And there's now a wake-up call because legislators are realizing the cost of that. So they're wanting to do something about it. So it's going to take a change of the systems to be able to do that. You can't just release them, and there's sentencing laws. There's many organizations working on this. The Sentencing Project in Washington, D.C., and many other groups are working on that. And as much as they can, local jurisdictions are doing things like having a mental health court, so that an individual that has committed a crime but also has mental health issues is referred to the mental health court, and hopefully their mental health is addressed rather than just sending them to prison, which they do not have anywhere near adequate mental health services within the prisons. There is some substance abuse treatment in the prisons, but it's not nearly adequate. It's minimal, and the number of people that are able to access it are few that are able to do that. The United States spends $80 billion a year on the incarceration. So that's $260 per US resident, in case you want to know what it's costing you. The United States incarcerates at a higher rate than any other country in the world. Let's see. Today, 1 out of every 32 residents of the United States is in the criminal justice system, either on parole, probation, or in one of the institutions, jail or prison. So if you just look around and even think of who's on this call today, that's a very high rate. And to make things worse, nationally, the return rate to prison of those that come out of prison, 67% return to prison. So it's a very poor success rate of being able to have individuals not return back to prison. And if that was a business model, totally broken if it was looked at in that way. So we've had a lot of history of building up a system that's punitive, that doesn't address the basic causes and basic needs, and is not really serving the individuals or serving society. And so that's the premise, that we believe that every individual deserves an opportunity for optimal life. And as we say, they do the hard work, we don't. So I'm going to let Georgia tell you about how the program was developed.
Well, as I said before, we started this program in 2013. And the model that we decided upon was to focus our primary energies on figuring out how to help people who come out of prison. Oh, I'm sorry. We needed to find a way to secure housing for people as they come out. Just a moment. Faye Jacobs, who's going to join us, her Zoom link is not working. So Rose is dealing with that. The issue was that our system is designed so that it's almost impossible for people coming straight out of prison to find a landlord willing to rent to them. And it's difficult to find a job that's an employer that's willing to hire them. And it's difficult for them to come out on their own and suddenly need to secure their own mental health treatment, their own physical health treatment, their own substance abuse treatment. However, most of the people coming out of prison are stipulated by the parole board to achieve all of those things in order to stay out of prison. And just imagine if you come out, they drop you off at the Greyhound bus station and you're on your own. If you happen to have family who are willing to take a chance on working with you, you're in great shape. I mean, that's a big plus. But many people, because of their addiction, have kind of burned their bridges, and their families are reluctant to immediately jump in and secure any help for them. And those are the very people that we saw that were falling between the cracks. We worked at Catholic Charities here in Kansas City for 2 years when we first came to Kansas City, and we worked in the program called Turnaround. And the Turnaround program served all of the people, but primarily gave things like clothing and bus passes and things like that, you know, sort of the emergency assistance part of things. We felt like a more holistic approach would be to get them into housing. And so we began developing relationships with landlords. We began developing relationships with employers. We began developing relationships with Truman Behavioral to provide mental health coverage. In other words, we didn't want to provide all of the services. We just wanted to have the connections to the community in order to make it possible to get people into a system very rapidly. Until a couple of years ago, when people came out who were on psychiatric medications in Missouri, they were not given any medications to continue their treatment. So one day they were actually in the prison receiving psychiatric medications, and the next day they were out on the street and they had no access to those medications. A couple of years ago, that changed by the Missouri legislature, but that just shows you just one little tiny piece of the problem for re-entering. There are so many consequences. There are so many jobs that are not available to them. For example, we've had many nurses who've come to our program who can no longer be in nursing because of their drug use. There are actual barbers and hairdressers until quite recently couldn't even have a license anymore. They could not resume their license to cut hair or serve in that capacity. There are so many barriers to re-entering. It's no wonder that people turn back to the very behaviors that many have learned over the course of their lifetime. In 2015, a particular situation happened here in Kansas City that made us realize that we needed to have more time in a safe place for women coming out of prison. And that was because the state of Missouri shut down its halfway house for women. And literally, because they had so many men to be placed in that halfway house, they literally gave them trash bags to put all of their things and put them on the street and told them to go to a shelter. Well, the only shelters available to them were shelters that you had to check in each day and check out in the afternoon and not be there, and then come back the next day and try to check in again. So they were literally going from downtown area in a shelter out to Midtown to treatment, carrying their bag of all of their whatever they had, clothing that they had gotten, and it was not safe. They were literally on the street or in shelters. So one day, Sister Berta from Operation Breakthrough came walking down the street to me. Normally she had several women in hand that she wanted us to house. And she said, "Georgia, how would you like to have a 22-room house that you could start for women?" And I said, "I'd love it, but I don't have any money." She said, "Oh, I have a donor too." And so we were able in 2015 to acquire a property where we could have 22 bedrooms. And I went home that night to the convent. I was living with 5 other sisters. And I said, "Who wants to be in a halfway house for women with me?" The oldest sister, who was in her 80s, raised her hand immediately, said, "I'll come." And then Sister Rose and one other, Sister Gabe, said, "Okay, we'll give it a try." So we moved in and started taking women straight out of prison. We'd pick them up at the place and at the bus station and bring them into our program. Since then, we've now served over 650 women, a little more than that, a little over 650 women less than 5% of those women have gone back to prison. So we have a remarkable success rate. And what we do is we give them a goal of try within 90 days. Let's try together to get all the things that you need to have a productive life. Let's get your health care, your dental care. Many women come out with no teeth because as they've suffered dental problems inside the prison, what they do is just pull all of their teeth. And so they come out with no dentures, no teeth. So we formed a relationship with a nonprofit agency to purchase dentures. We pay for health care. We get them started on their mental health care. We get them started on their care for addiction. We give them clothes, telephone, support for getting a job when they're ready to, when the basics are cared for, taken care of, then they can work on getting a job. And we do that through Bishop Sullivan Center. We have over 80 partnerships with different agencies to provide services. But the basic is, if you give people a chance and give them with absolute unconditional support and love, it's amazing the kind of transformation that some of the goodness that we know that is within them starts coming out. We have, over these years, been absolutely amazed. For 5 years, 4 of us have lived in the house with them. Just in September, we moved out because we're moving to a new model. And we are actually taking people who were successful graduates of the program to be the house managers. They go through a program that the state offers called Peer Support Specialists. It's people who've been there, done that, and survived and are doing well. And they become certified to be with, companion with people who have been in the same place as the women coming out of prison. So we have 2 house managers in each house. Oh, I forgot to mention that in 2019, we got a second house. I was having to turn down about 10 people, 10 women a month on average. And so the sisters, the Benedictine sisters, had a convent with 22 bedrooms located just blocks from our first house, Journey House. And they sold it to us for a dramatically reduced price, about 1/3 of the appraised value. So now we have approximately 20 beds at one and 20 beds at the other, so we can accommodate about 40 women at a time. We give them 3 months as a goal, but sometimes there's extenuating factors. You would not believe the amount of trauma that most of these women have been through in their lives. They've been in multiple abusive situations. They've been shot, they've been raped, they've been beaten up. Many have been, one woman told me recently she had been in 18 foster homes and had been raped by the caregivers in those foster homes numerous times. The deep kind of trauma that we're working with and helping them work through is done by what is known as trauma-informed care. And it's taking into account all of that trauma and the ways in which that affects their capacity to even engage in normal relationships. I mean, it's a work in progress. In other words, while you're working on your addiction and your mental health, you're also working on getting through that trauma that you've been through. We've had recently a woman who was shot and came to us with her jaws wired shut, having to survive and worry about, was this person going to shoot her again if he saw her coming or going from our house. It's on the one hand, we've learned more from them probably than we ever provide to them. This we have one of the women that has been successful in our program on the air right now. Her name is Faye. Are you on, Faye?
Faye is on.
I am on. Yes, I am here.
Tell them what a crazy program we have.
Oh no. So I entered Journey to New Life back in 2018 after being released from prison of serving 27 years in prison for a crime I didn't commit. I was sentenced to life without parole. And my attorneys, the Midwest Innocent Projects here out of Kansas City, Missouri, had gotten me out. I'm originally from Arkansas, and I was in an Arkansas facility. And so once I was released in 2018 of July, I came to Kansas City with my attorneys and them trying to get me situated. I was able and directed to Journey to New Life. And it was at that time my life really began, because, you know, being in prison for so long and getting out to people you don't know, a whole environment, a whole new world. When I went in, I was only 16 years old, and they didn't have the cell phones, all the technology that they have now. And so basically I was just threw out there. And so I had my attorneys and they were like, we got to get, you know, something, because I had lost my family along the way. A lot of my family members, and then my parents was elderly, so they didn't have a place for me, so I needed somewhere. And so I ended up at Journey to New Life, and that was the best decision that happened, with my attorneys get me there, and then Journey accepting me, because being that I was coming from out of another state and they didn't know anything about me. They just knew that this was some young lady that had been in prison all her life, 20 plus years. So they were taking a risk with me, not even knowing anything about me. But I'm so grateful, because when I got there was never a judgmental day. They treated me with love, compassion, understanding, because I lacked so much, and I still lack a lot because I'm still learning. But they carried me, you know. I'm where I am today because of Journey to New Life. Had I not went through that program, I don't think I would be a success. I really don't believe it. I contribute all my success to Journey to New Life. They changed my life. They let me know that my circumstances doesn't determine who I am today and who I can be today. You know, I can be a success story. I can be a law-abiding citizen. I can make it out here in this world. And there are support. There's people out here that care, that want to help you. And they show me that. And, you know, they loved on me. They showed me that agape love, you know, like I had never seen before. And I'm like, oh my God, is this real? You know, what is going on? You know, you got these nuns and they loving on you and they helping you, and you got training coming in with everything. I mean, from A to B. And you got to understand that I had never had driving license. I didn't have ID. I'd never worked, none of this. But because of Journey to New Life, I was able to get an ID, driving license, and get everything I need and some, even to be able to get housing, you know, with them helping me, you know, them carrying the weight for me to help me, and, you know, and encouraging me and motivating me. And I couldn't have did it. And, you know, I'm just so happy to be a part of Journey to New Life. I feel like I owe my life to them, you know, because they changed my life so dramatic. I mean, it's just unbelievable. There's no words to describe how they impacted my life and how they continue to impact my life. You know, this was just 2018, and I'm still a part of Journey to New Life. That's my life forever, you know, because of them and what they have instilled in me, and them carrying me and investing in my life and believing in me, and, you know, allowing me, you know, to come to their program just without waver. They didn't question it, you know. And then I think about, I'm like, would I have done that, you know, allow someone I didn't know anything about, you know? She's been in prison. This lady's got to be crazy. But, you know, they didn't even think like that. You know, they didn't know, but they took a chance with me, you know, and they didn't judge me. And so, you know, it's programs like that we need, and we need people like that. And I'm very grateful. And I'm always telling people about Journey to New Life, you know, because they make a difference, you know, they make a difference in our lives. They made a difference in my life. And, you know, I continue to work and now become a board member. And I'm just honored. It's an honor, you know, to be able to do whatever I can to continue to make that program successful, because it is a successful program. If you work it and you listen to those ladies and do what you're supposed to do, there's no reason why you can't be a success.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Faye.
But stay on in case there's questions.
Oh yeah, I'll be on the whole time.
Okay.
Okay.
I can guarantee there will be questions.
There, like my first question to Faye when she got out is, how come you're not angry and bitter? And she gave a very good answer. I wanted to tell how it was that you didn't come out so angry and bitter, Faye.
You know, first of all, it's not about me. It's bigger than me. And, you know, I think about so many people. There are so many people that's in prison and been in prison for crimes they didn't commit. But I mean, the thing of it is, why be bitter and angry, you know, because you're not hurting anyone but yourself, and you can't be free. And it's about turning your hurt into passion to make a difference in people's lives, you know, because you never want anyone to experience what you experience and go down the path you've been through, you know. So it's about just turning my hurt into passion for people and organizations like this organization. To be bitter, I don't feel like I'm worthy to be angry. You know, look what they did to Christ. You know, he endured so much, and it's so much bigger than me. I don't have the right to be angry regardless of what they did. And people think I should be, but no, I'm not. I'm not angry. I have no ill feelings towards those, because people do things for various reasons. And I truly believe it's a reason and a purpose for everything, you know. And I think about, you know, where my life would have been had I not went to prison, in spite of going there for something I didn't do. But, you know, I think God brought me out for a time such as this. You know, I think about the Joseph in the Bible. He was sold into slavery by his brothers for a crime he didn't commit. They lied on him and all that stuff. But after doing so much time in prison, he got out. He was able to save his brothers, and his family, they went into a famine and he saved it. And my family is struggling and going through. So I've been able to bring my parents here with me and to care for them, my siblings, because they are like in poverty. So I'm just grateful to be able to just change lives. And I feel like my life was set apart and aside for a time such as this. But bitterness and anger is something that I just do not have in me.
Thanks.
Thanks, Faye.
Yes.
Well, the interesting thing that we have discovered is that sometimes crime runs in families, not Faye's family, but currently we have a mother now at one of our houses, and she has 9 children, all of whom have been in prison. She's been in prison. Her 9 children have been in prison. And the 3 girls have been at our house. She actually took those daughters with her to commit crimes. So the people in that family have all been in the criminal justice system. Now, how do you stop that from going generation to generation if you're being raised not like Faye in a household that was of faith and respectable community, action? How do you interrupt that process? How do we keep there from being a 3rd generation? And that's what we find ourselves getting involved in very often, of multiple family members of the same, family coming to us. Now, on the men's side, altogether, we serve about 2,000 people coming out of prison a year. 75% of them are men and 25% are women. And for the men, we do not have a house like Journey House and Peace House, mostly because we can't find men who are willing to live in those houses to supervise the houses like we could get nuns to do. But now we're moving into this new model of peer support specialists. And they are people who are trained to give back to the community from which they've come. They've been there, done that, and now at both houses, the nuns have moved out, but we have 2 peer support specialists in each house. And they do their work as well as the nuns do. They're all hand-picked graduates of our program who left our program and were successful, like Faye, and now have come back and taken this training and are actively involved in recovery from both addiction and stabilization for mental health. So they're trained in techniques like de-escalation of disputes, of conflicts. They're trained for how to talk somebody down who is anxious. And so far, it's working well. And we did that because we knew that there was a wealth of information that was coming in and going out our door every day. So we're now in the position of looking for several men who will do that peer support training and become peer support specialists. to work with the men that are our clients. We have multiple grants to do our work, but I want to mention that one of the absolute keys to this program is community involvement in the work that we're doing. It is so important to people to feel welcome back, not just by our program, but by members of the community. So we have different churches that adopt parts of our program. The program goes like this. We have first emergency assistance for anyone who may or may not have a home to come and get all the basics to get started, hygienes, clothes, and IDs, birth certificates, because they come out with nothing. You would think that if somebody was in prison and they had been photographed so many times while they've been incarcerated, that they could come out with a state ID. But no, that would be too easy. So they don't have a state ID. But in order to get a state ID, you have to have a birth certificate. And you've got to know where you were born. And we have people coming to us from states all over the country. So we have to write off for their birth certificate before they can even get an ID. And you have to have an ID before you can get medical care. You have to have an ID before you can get any of the things that are desperately needed. We have a woman here at Journey House right now who, while she was in prison, they discovered that she had a cancer of the kidney, and they removed that kidney and left a kidney. Well, before she got out, she discovered that she had they did an exam and found that she had nodules in her good kidney and her bladder. And they said, well, when you get out in a couple of years, they'll give you the treatment, but it's beyond the scope of our ability to treat it. So 2 years later, she came out and now she has more metastases. And the problem that happens is the state of Missouri is paying more for health care for the people in prison than they pay for Medicaid, for everybody else in the state that gets Medicaid. But what they do in prison is they pay a company by the head a certain amount per month or per day, whether you get care or you don't get care. So the perverse incentive is to undercare, underperform. So we have both men and women coming out with cancers in various stages, hepatitis C, which if untreated could cause death. They don't have the care that corresponds to their medical conditions. So the emergency assistance is the first program. Once we see that you're out on the street, then we work towards getting you into housing, usually an apartment. And we do that with HUD grants. And we pay the first initial deposit and rent for 3 months minimum, and provide case management for 6 to 12 months, depending upon need. And while they're in that kind of situation in housing, then we can help them work on everything else they need. And then we have the programs that I've been talking about mostly, the 2 houses for women that are really sort of an intensive care model. And it's just because the state has very few facilities for women coming out of prison. They primarily have facilities for men. So that's why we got involved here in Kansas City with the women.
Georgia said a little while ago about needing the community participation. And part of that is, if you know of any landlords, encourage them to be willing to rent to ex-offenders because they deserve a chance. Take somebody like Faye, to be continually turned down is just demoralizing. You know, she and all of them need a chance to prove themselves. And also employers to hire them. The city has banned the box so that the little box on applications for city employees isn't there saying, do you have a felony record? However, that's just employees of the city. All of the other privately owned businesses don't have that requirement, and they still do a lot of sifting out of for ex-offenders. And so those are just two of the things that people in the community can do.
But in addition to that, we have families that actually come down and bring food, and they like will cook a meal and come and sit with the women in our houses and get to know the women and get to know their stories and listen to them. And the women often just have as many tears in their eyes as the guests have tears in their eyes, because the women tell their stories, and they feel so moved by the fact that people in the community want to come and get involved. So we have a lot of people that come to our office and have learned. We have volunteers that meet with people freshly out of prison and find out what they need and help get those things they need. That's all done by volunteers that are supervised there on the site. We have people that, for example, one church just recently had the women in the church come on to a Zoom program, and their sole thing was to collect personal care items for the women in our houses and for the men that we serve through the main office. And we got loads and loads of lotion and soap, and I mean, you name it, all the things that people need, toothpaste, toothbrushes. And the women and men are so touched by the fact that people in the community are reaching out their hand and say, welcome back. We want you to be a success. This is our little part of helping Journey to New Life welcome you back. It means so much because they're faced with so many obstacles in life. It is absolutely refreshing and mind-blowing to find out that there are members of the community that want them to be able to succeed. We say at Journey to New Life that we are tough on crime because our people don't go back. And that's why we continue to appreciate the fact that we have community support from the city, from the county, from the state, and from the federal government, but most importantly, from members of the community that help us do this work, because it's in many ways more important than money. It's that taking the time to show people that you care for them and want them to succeed.
We have a website that has more information on it and all of our contact information, and it's just www.journeytonewlife.org. And there's a video on that as well that shows some of the participants and things that they have to say, as well as we have other stories and other features. We have an email newsletter as well. So if anybody would like to get involved, you're certainly welcome. We'd like to. And I think now we can open it to questions.
Remember that you need to unmute yourself to be able to ask a question. And I know that you all have some.
Surely some of the women in your program have children. Do you have facilities for them to be with their children, or is this something that they need to complete before they go back to their children?
We actually have children visiting their moms. We've had, in some cases, infants live there with their moms. So we try to accommodate as much as possible. I think the maximum, the oldest children that we've allowed to come and stay on the weekends is around 12 or 13. But we've had both younger boys and girls. But that's another part. Family reunification is another part of our the work we do, because some people come out and whoever has been caring for their children while they've been in prison may or may not want the mother to be back in touch with their children. So part of our work is facilitating the communication between the members of the family and helping them sort out a new relationship with each other.
One of the factors that we consider is that the women are very busy. You know, all of the things that we mentioned that are resources, those are time consuming, and they take the bus every place they go, which, you know, adds on to the amount of time. So they need to get themselves together and get settled prior to taking on too much responsibility. So that's part of what the case managers and those of us involved try to help them look at and work with, so that they're not taking on too much too soon and just getting overwhelmed. So it varies with each situation.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good plan. I had another question, so I'll go ahead and ask it. And maybe this is on your website. I'm sure there's some sort of screening for the women who come into your program to make sure that they're the kind of people that can be successful in your program with all of the challenges that they've had. But I'm sure you also have some rules. Aren't there rules for staying in the house? I know you give them a lot of support and help, but that's got to be probably part of the program. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, I do interviews, one-on-one interviews with the women before they're released. They're essentially doing an application by interview with me. But in addition to that, I have the input of the staff of the prison, their internal case workers or internal parole officers or reentry specialists. I have their input as well. So we know a lot about the women, not not with Faye, we didn't know, but we know a lot about the women that we're accepting. But the interesting thing is that the word is spread within the 2 women's prisons, and also to a number of the federal prisons for women. It is, the reputation has preceded us. And so they know that there are rules, and in the interview, I talk about the rules in advance. We also have a lot of information about their history, about what their goals are. But I know that the reason why one part of the reason that we have a good success rate is the people that apply to come to us are the ones who are serious to do something different with their life.
One of the surprises for us was that the majority of the women that come to the 2 houses are not from the Kansas City area. They're from all over the state. And the reason that they choose to apply is that if they went back to their same location, in the same situation, the same people, they're going to end up doing the same thing. And so it's a very conscious choice, and it's not easy for them to give up the people that they know and be far away from home and literally just starting all over like Faye did, and not knowing anyone. But they come having made that hard choice already. So that's definitely an advantage, is that they really have decided they want to do things differently this time.
Also the experience that women and men have within the prison system is a very correctional kind of punitive model of settling disputes, settling problems by the most punitive measures. And they're kind of surprised to come out and find that we do restorative processes, sitting down. We had a recent case of a woman who had stolen $35 from one of the other women. And none of us knew who did it. But we sat down in a circle, and the woman whose money had been taken, she explained to the group what effect it had on them. And then the other members of the group started talking about how that affected them and how it changed their behavior, thinking that they had a thief within in the community, in the small community. By the end of the session, the person who had done the theft admitted that she had been the one that had done it, and said why she had done it, explained to them, but told them how sorry she was. She didn't realize what a widespread effect it had on everyone. And so they were able to come up with a way of undoing the harm that was created both to the women and to the whole community. And from that day forward, then that person became a totally different, person within the community, because now people knew that she came forward and fessed up and was willing to make reparations for what she had done. And anyway, they felt better about her, and she felt better about all of them.
What are some other questions?
I have a couple comments. I'm sure I'm speaking for everyone when I say how very impressed, rather overwhelmed I am by everything you've done and the short time you've done it in. And it sounds like the learning process for you too has to have been really, really steep, and you have learned so much, and you are doing so fantastically that I just want to give you just a giant round of applause. And I also think I speak for everybody else, kind of wondering what we can do and how we can do something for your program, since you are filling so many needs, and yet there are so many needs out there that can be done. So I'm glad to know about your website. I also have kind of a question for Faye. Loved your story, Faye, and you are certainly an impressive young woman, and I just can't imagine surviving what you did. Within that 25 plus years, surely, what got you through? Did your facility have any kind of programs or relationships that allowed you to come out of this with your faith and your positive attitude toward life?
Well, you first said the key, my faith. My faith kept me throughout my whole incarceration. I was raised up in church. My dad was a pastor. And so I've always had the faith, but my faith grew stronger. And in being in prison, I was able to develop that personal relationship with him. And while there, because I had life without parole, I wasn't allotted the opportunity to get into programs or take college or even education. Everything I know now, I've learned since I've been out and just, but I wasn't allowed that because their thinking in Arkansas is, you're here for the rest of your life. So why do we need to educate her? Why do we need to do this and that for her? There's no need. She's going to be here for the rest of her life. So that's how they treat prisoners with life sentences in Arkansas. So you forced to teach yourself. But I was able to attend faith-based programs where it was no limitations of your sentence. It didn't matter. They allowed you to come in. And in those programs, they had programs like Thinking Air, a program called Thinking Air to, your thinking pattern, how to change your thinking habits when they're negative. And we had anger management. They offered anger management inside this faith-based program. Anger management, Thinking Airs, and I think that was all they had offered in this. And so I just took advantage of it. And the program was like a 6-month program, but I stayed in the program like 8-9 years. I basically lived in the program. I became the program. I love structure. And that's something that Journey to New Life, when you go there, you're going into structure. That whole environment is structure environment. And so, a lot of people may say, oh, okay, because you're incarcerated. No, I feel like structures and our authorities are very important. And, they're put in place as a protection. And a lot of people don't realize that. And I'm grateful that I learned the protection of our authorities and structures. And so that's what I govern my life by. I love structure. I love my authorities. And you get that at Journey. And so it was just basic my faith that carried me, and being involved in positive things they had there. They had a thing called inmate council. And what inmate council is to be the middleman for staff to bring the staff and inmates together, because you had your rough inmates and you had your rough staff both ways, but to mend that gap. And so I was a part of that. I was a vice president of that inmate council, and being on that board and just being involved in everything I was allowed to. I was fortunate enough to travel. I was able to leave the facility and travel, believe this or not, that's just a favor of God. But I was able to travel all over the state of Arkansas, singing and sharing my story. The Bible says God will make provisions for your gifts. Definitely he did that when I was incarcerated. And that was something, it just blew people's minds. She has life without parole. How she's able, when I was escorted by guards, and there were like 3 other inmates with me, but I was the only one with life without parole. The other ladies had numbered years. And so, you know, God gave me a lot of favor within the facility. And so, you know, I'm just very thankful and humble for those opportunities and things that I learned in there. And, you know, it's just so much bigger, and I just don't have any room to be angry when you know what you know. And it's so big. It's like, what, you know, I don't have any room. Me personally, I cannot be angry, and it's just all my faith. It's none of me. It's all him. I give him the glory for everything that's in my life. That anything positive in my life is not because of me. It's all because of him.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
See why we have her on our board? We need that kind of guidance and remembrance. She brings to every board decision a prayer as well. Are there, back to that.
Hey, what kind of,
Oh, go on. Go on.
Faye, you mentioned that you have a job now. What are you doing?
So I am a full-time caretaker of my parents. I take care of them, but I also work for McCarthy Moore Chevrolet at the car dealership. I love my job. I love those people. They are amazing. And I work there. And then I have a side business. It's called Innocence 2, TOO. And that job is governed around helping other inmates that's getting out of prison, needing a ride to the hospital, to doctor's appointments, to get their driving license free of no charge, you know, just being available when they need help. Because I know what it was like. You know, I went to Journey, and my first like 30 days, I was riding a bus and getting acclimated on how to ride a bus. It was so scary. I remember all those experiences, and I was like, oh my God, I don't want no one to ever have to do this, you know, getting out of prison. And so it was a learning experience. And so that's when I came up with the ideal of Innocence 2, my story being innocent. And there's so many other innocent people, like my brother Ricky Kidd, who I talk to every day. I'm quite sure y'all know Ricky Kidd and Lamont. You know, we're all family and we talk all the time. But yeah, it's just so many, this broken justice system. But anyway, so I'm just giving back, you know, trying to help and make a difference. Yeah.
Are there other questions?
Hi, this is Sherry. I've got 2. What differences in your program does using the trauma-informed care model make? What would we see that's different there because of that? Do you have on-site services? And secondly, well, go ahead and answer that one, and then I'll do my.
Okay, well, first of all, when we were actually learning all of these stories about all of this deep trauma, our first inclination was to educate all of our staff. And so we all had attended various programs that are offered by primarily Truman Behavioral to train workers. And then we also had a professor of social work from UMKC, who that happened to be her specialty. So she developed courses that she was doing at the undergraduate and graduate level at UMKC. She brought them to our staff. And primarily it is like it's employing a form of motivational interviewing. Like, you don't decide for the person where they should be or what goal they should have. It's helping them make those decisions and gradually develop sort of their own care plan or the trajectory that they want to follow. But it's also being willing to listen to their painful stories and have them explore what is the impact they believe that it's having on their current life and their capacity to trust, to engage in healthful relationships. It's a number of modalities all rolled into one, but I can say with conviction that all of our staff operates on that principle, that we need to know about that trauma from the very beginning or as early as we can develop trust, and that we direct all of our efforts around motivating people to follow their own plans as opposed to imposing our ideas of where they should be and what they should be working on next. Does that answer?
Yes,
I mean,
thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you. Secondly, what you're doing is making such a huge difference in the lives of people, and it's a wonderful program, but it's obvious that the problem is systemic. I mean, I hope it's unintentional, that it's set up so when you're released from jail, from prison, you're going to fail. You have no supports in place, it's most likely that you're going to fail. So I know Sister Berta had to spend a lot of time at the legislature trying to make a dent. What kinds of efforts are happening now that are trying to make systemic change in these huge problems?
Well, in the state of Missouri, we're involved with a consortium of providers of services for people suffering from addictions and people who are re-entering society after incarceration. We've been working on legislation now for
20 years.
20 plus years.
I'll bet.
And because Missouri has kind of a revolving door, you know, you can only serve 2 terms and then you're out. We've got fresh new legislators coming in every year. So we go and visit. Part of the promising aspects in Missouri is that they're setting aside a certain pot of money specifically for reentry, and they engage with nonprofits like ourselves to give grants to work with specific aspects of reentry. So like we have had in the past, like 4 of those grants at a time for different subpopulations. So for the first time, a little bit of money is being diverted. But in addition to that, there are changes in the sentencing guidelines so that there is a serious attempt to send fewer people to prison and to divert them into programs that will help them not be in prison. So like in St. Louis, when we were there in that agency, we had a diversion project going where we would appear in court with the offenders and say, if you sentence them to our program as opposed to prison, we'll prove to you that we can do a better job of keeping them from, you know, starting a new relationship. I mean, a new life.
One of the other things that we do is, of course, we talk to legislators about particular things, but in a few years ago, a statewide group of us had the whole committee of the Missouri House on corrections. And we did an educational process and brought in a federal policy group to help do an educational thing about sentencing. And they came up to, at the end of it, they said to us, basically, if we put that law forth, I wouldn't be reelected. So you've got to educate the public. So the public expects differently of us than what they are now. And basically they were saying the public expects us to be punitive. They don't want us to be soft on crime. So we take speaking engagements anytime we get the opportunity, just so that we can help people to understand that.
There is a dramatic difference in the sentencing that varies from county to county in terms of who gets sent to prison and what percentage gets sent to prison. And so one of our opportunities for speaking, the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys invited us to put on educational sessions. And we were surprised at the number of prosecutors that said, like the legislators, we've got to be tough on crime or we won't get reelected. But we still maintain contact with many of those prosecuting attorneys. The prosecuting attorney in Greene County in Springfield has become very much a champion of restorative justice and trying to keep people out of prison, because he knows that if they go to prison, they're more likely to come back to prison. And if they go to an alternative project that is run well, they won't be in prison again. So he says it makes sense, and the way he sells it on the campaign trail is to say, do you want good results for the money you spend? If you want good results, we've got to try some new things, because in the past 2 decades, we have increased the prison population by 800%, and it's not working. So let's try some other things that are proving to be more successful, that are helping people stay out of prison. And as a side benefit, it costs less money. So.
Well, you must have more hours in your day than the average person, because it sounds like you're doing even a lot more than we knew as far as long-term solutions and as well as short-term. So your work is greatly appreciated.
Well, thank you.
I'm just thinking of the wasted resources of the lives of the people who are in prisons and coming out of there without support. And I think any thoughtful person has always known that there's a lot wrong, and there's even more wrong than I had thought about. I'm very grateful for the work that you are both doing, and for Faye coming to tell us about her experiences also, and hope that you receive all kinds of support for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate that.
Any
Other questions for any of our speakers?
Faye, what would you say is was the hardest part? What's the hardest thing of coming out?
I think coming out to a place, an unknown place, something you're not familiar with, you know, you don't know if you're going to be judged, you're going to be mistreated, you know, because I mean, I've heard and seen of a lot of people and heard stories of, you know, things happening to women, especially when I was incarcerated for so long, and some of the ladies would return back to prison. And, you know, my question would be, what happened? Why did you come back? You know, it can't be that bad out there. So hearing their stories of how bad it is out here. And so you thinking like, am I going to go through this? You know, but that's not the case. And so I think, you know, just not knowing, but once you see that there is support, it makes a big difference, and it will make a big difference, you know, because when you're getting out of prison, you don't know, you know, and even some that even have the family support, you still don't know, because you don't know what they expect of you, and they don't know what you expect of them. There is a in between that you just don't know, and so you're afraid, you're excited, you got a bunch of emotions going on, but I think it was just the unknown, and then to get out here, and then I see that, you know, I have the support. There are places and people that help you. Now my issue is, you know, how am I going to adapt? And then I come to the realization they're helping. They're going to help you adapt. You know, it's like Journey to New Life. It's everything in one big bundle. Everything that you need is there. And I know not all organizations are like that, and everybody's not fortunate to, you know, get the support like that, but those that are, everything is available, everything you need, you know, with mental health, everything, the support you need. But, you know, I guess it's just not knowing exactly. And, you know, I was so afraid, and, you know, and not wanting to disappoint, you know, I just had so many worries, and I suffered a lot because I was afraid that I used to, when I first got home, when I saw a cop, I would freeze up because I thought they were gonna accuse me again. And, you know, I dealt with that. I mean, I went through that, you know, it don't bother me anymore. But I mean, my first year being out, I really suffered a lot from the trauma of being incarcerated, but having that support just made a big difference, and it continues to make a difference. And I continue to heal every single day.
And you have your little friend there to help you.
I have my support baby. Her name is Mercy. This is Mercy. Mercy, you want to say hi? She's amazing. But I have two fur babies, and I have a tiny teacup Chihuahua. She has become my mother's support, emotional support dog. She was my first one, but she just couldn't handle Mercy. But Mercy is forward. I take her to work. I take her everywhere. This is my baby. Yes.
No, I have a question for Sister Georgia and Sister Rose. You're already doing so much, but for a family who's going to have someone who gets out of prison, do you have any kind of training or program or guidelines for what a family can do to help the person, since they won't be coming to your organization, but the kind of all the things they need to do, the timeline it needs to follow? You said that you have a 90-day goal to just get some basics before and get over some of the trauma. So do you have any kind of guidelines for families who are going to try to do what your organization does?
Well, actually, I get a lot of phone calls from families and asking advice. We've not developed an official program, but on a one-on-one basis, we've, you know, been able to help talk families through the process.
Okay.
This is particularly true for families that have someone coming out that has a history of addiction or mental illness.
That's the case. Yes.
Because
Family.
those two things, getting them linked up with the appropriate caregivers, you know, is really important. And that's very difficult in some of the rural areas of Missouri where there simply aren't those kinds of services. But it would be a good idea. Maybe we'll write a grant and get somebody to, that might be a good idea. That would free up my time from talking one-on-one.
Oh.
We could have a group session of how to plan for your loved one coming home.
But also,
Oh, thank you very much.
if the person is in the Kansas City area, they and the family can come to the office, and we have the case managers that meet with them. You don't have to live in it. The ex-offender doesn't have to live in one of the residences to receive services.
Okay.
They can still get quite a few services
Yeah.
from us. And also referrals to appropriate places.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, because we have, as Georgia said, a working relationship with Bishop Sullivan Center, with Seton Center, all of those. So if we do the referral, they'll
Get them right in.
get them right in.
Okay. It'll be a few years before the person is out.
Okay.
I'm making a note. Thank you.
Yeah.
You can come and help us develop the course.
There you
Yes,
go.
so,
That would be your contribution.
Well,
That's a good idea.
thank you.
I just want to say thank you to Sister Rose and Sister
Yeah.
for all that you've done for these women and men and for our entire community. My goodness, I am just amazed. How is Sister Gabe doing? I do know her from another source long ago. Is she still working?
She lives with us.
Yes.
We
Good.
lived together when we moved out of Journey House in September and moved into a house, and she's doing fine, and she goes to Journey House almost every single day.
Oh, God.
She's the courier back and forth between our house but all three of us are going to start going back there on a daily basis now that we've had our shots.
Well,
And so
I think it's wonderful how you have taken the women going through your program and made them into the peer support specialists. And
yeah,
Yeah.
they become the house mothers, right? I mean, they're living there.
right.
Yes. Right.
That's right.
Right.
Oh, that is amazing. Thank
Yeah.
you for all your time and energy and love that you've shared with them and with us. We are so
Thank
grateful.
you. Thank you for speaking up. I didn't know you were on the call. Good.
Yeah, thank you. So,
Well, we are at 3 o'clock, so if you have any burning last minute questions, now is the time to ask them.
I just wanted to ask one more time, Faye, did I hear correctly that you were 16 when you were put in prison with life without parole?
Yes, ma'am, for a crime that I didn't commit. Yes.
You were a baby.
Yes.
Were there
And
other
they let-
people that young? How you grew up in prison?
Exactly. I was the youngest inmate there with life without parole. However, there was a 14-year-old there. Her and I were the two youngest, but she had like a 20-year sentence. But I was the only inmate in the whole state of Arkansas. What do you think about that? But to be
Wow.
sentenced to life without parole. Yeah.
I think that's sick. That's what I think about that.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I think
so-
they're amazing.
So did the Supreme Court also thought it was sick. And
Yes.
and they said that you should not send teenagers
Yes.
to prison in adult prisons. And for sure, you should not give them life sentences.
Yes, thank goodness for that.
It makes no
Yes.
sense. And so that was one of the many reasons for which Faye was able to, with the help of legal assistance, get out of prison, because she
Yes.
fell into that category of being
That's right.
sent so early, aside from the fact that she didn't do it, and they could offer the evidence for that.
Yes.
Well, I would like to thank all three of our speakers today, Faye and Sister Georgia and Sister Rose. This has been very enlightening. A reminder to the rest of you, I will be getting out the recording to you all of today's session so that you can review it. I will also be sure and attach the website so that you can educate yourself further and see how you can personally contribute to this program.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you to everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Bye-bye.